So chances are, if you run a Ruby on Rails app, you've come across a gem called devise, and that's the typical, I guess, status quo of what a typical Ruby on Rails app, unless you want to roll it yourself, uses for authentication. It just has a lot of the bells and whistles taken care of, so it's kind of one of those things where you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and it just handles a lot of use cases. And then there's like extensions that allow you to do like OmniAuth with like Google or Facebook or whatever app you want to, Twitter. And then of course there's just more extensions of just extending it to like invite users or log in as specific users, something like that. So while it's very verbose, it is something that is, it's kind of I guess like a hammer solution. So it's like, it's just going to try to tackle everything. And sometimes you don't need that specific weight of that hammer in an app. So recently I've dealt with like a password issue where I'm sick of logging into websites with a password and email. And while the magic link solution isn't great, that much great either, or better either, I find it a little more elegant and there's less to remember. The only thing you really need to remember is like the email you used on the app you've logged in with. So while this solution I'm in this guide isn't like super verbose, it is going to make use of a new gem I found called Passwordless, and this doesn't depend on devise at all. So that's the beauty of it as like one of those use cases. And then if you do want to use devise, there is a solution out there I just found that is it kind of extends devise to be passwordless if you wanted to. Maybe your app already has devise and you want to go ahead and just make that work. You totally could, and it's probably very quick and easy to do thanks to devise, which is great. But I figured we'd go kind of through the motions of using this other gem as the source of truth, just to have a bare bones user model and just eliminate some of the stuff that devise ships with. So I wanted to do it as more of an exercise just to see if this is something I could explore in my own apps and stuff I build on the side. So it's just an idea, but also just a guide just to show you if you wanted to do it yourself, you totally could. This is very basic app. It's nothing to look at, but the idea is you can create an account just like you would devise and sign in. The sign in trick is that you only need your email. So John Doe, I think, has something already registered. It sends a magic link. I don't have this actually delivering because it's a local environment, but you can see it in the logs. There's a link to actually sign in that gets you quick access right into the app. And then maybe you have members only content that's only accessible by people that can visit the app. And that's the quick and dirty of how this works right now. Of course, your app will be very much more, usable and friendly, but the idea is this: you just use your email as a source of truth to get a magic link sent to you in the email. That could probably be extended to maybe use a text message too, or some sort of authentication solution, just to be more secure. As like two-factor authentication is probably going to become the status quo before long. That it's not. It takes more effort, but it is more secure by a long shot. So that's the quick and dirty of the app. I just wanted to show you by example. You create a new account. Maybe it's Jane Doe. Oh. The cool thing here is once I create, I'm just automatically logged in. So that's the kind of cool thing. I don't have to go through some confirmation dialogue and another email. You could probably extend it to include that step if you wanted to, but that's basically it. So I'm going to build that in this video and walk you through the process. We'll use this gem to do a lot of the heavy lifting. It is an engine. So a Rails engine is typically something you mount to a specific or existing app and, just inherit a lot of its logic, which is useful. But let's get started. I'll just go into my tutorials directory. There we go. I'll create a new app, and Rails new passwordless demo. I'm going to call it something different than I have. I'm going to pass Tailwind as our CSS and ESBuild as our JavaScript. So ESBuild. That'll create the new app and install those dependencies. All right, so we got that. So cd passwordless demo. All right, I'll open that in our code editor. I'm using VS Code. So maybe I'll do a get init just to get rid of the green. back here. All right, in the app, the main thing to get started is to actually install the gem. So it's a simple gem passwordless, and we'll bundle. With the gem installed, it gives you access to a few things that we'll need to run, and it's going to copy a migration file over. So if we follow the guide here, it's just running this command. So Rails passwordless install migrations. That's going to copy a migration file. So we'll look at that real quick just to show you for context what's going to be created. It's going to create a new table called passwordless sessions, and that's just a way to identify sessions that are active. And it's polymorphic, so it's more or less a way to extend this to any model you choose. And we'll get into that section in this. Can run our Rails DB migrate at this point, but it's probably easier just to go ahead and generate our user model as well. So I'll do that next. Rails generate. I'll clear this. Rails generate model user. We'll have a username and an email. So those are both strings. And just want to make sure I'm doing that right. There we go. Creates the record and then the table, the migration for it as well. So that's pretty simple. Then we can go ahead and Rails DB migrate. Okay, so that creates, as you notice, both of those migrations are now in the database schema. If you want to verify, you can just open schema, assuming you have it. And we're running this so far in our database. Next, let's add some support in our user model to both validate the email field that we're going to add to a view, and then also extend this passwordless gem. So we'll say validates email presence true. Then we want to make sure it's unique, so any new user can't have the existing email. So it's not case sensitive. So you could extend that to be a little more unique, I think, but for the purposes of this guide, we'll leave it pretty simple. So passwordless with, here's part of that gem. It hooks into this method, essentially says, what field are you going to actually denote for the passwordless functionality? And then with that, with the engine under the hood, we need to configure our gem routing, not our gem, our routing. We should also probably have a root route here, and I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to remove these comments, but for now, let's add what the gem docs suggest. So passwordless for, and then users. And where you can just denote like whatever resource. This could be members, this could be subscribers, whatever you want to use there. And it's going to be dependent on what you set in this model too. So make those, connect those dots basically is what we want to do. And then additionally, you need to add, if you want the current user construct that you're probably used to with devise, we can add that to our application controller layer. So we'll include a module, passwordless. This comes from the gem, and then helpers. It gives us access to a method below, which will be this one we're creating, helper method. And you can just say current user, and we'll set it private. So these are only accessible. So def current user, get an instance variable of current user, or assign it as this method, which we're getting from the gem itself by session. And we're passing user in this case because that's what we're extending the gem to use. And then we can hook into this method. Like, it's kind of like what you would have that authenticate by authenticate user method that you get from devise. So this is essentially the same. If current user, so if current user, we won't even worry about this, but we'll redirect to, what did I include here? I think it's the root path. Instead, I'm going to use users sign in. And then alert, please sign in to view this content. Cool. So you may look at this and be like, what the heck's going on? So the gem itself provides its own routes. So if you've ever looked at an engine You can basically, it's kind of a small Rails app within it. And the idea is that it provides its own routes, but it's within a namespace. So because we've established this in our routes here, we've declared that namespace. And that might be confusing, but it's more of a way to make that dynamic for the gem's sake. But in a typical gem, you could just call it whatever module you're calling the engine, or another name for a gem. And then in that case, we can use that namespace to target that specific sign-in path that doesn't actually exist on our current app. It's within the gem. So I hope that's clear. It's probably a little fuzzy, but it might be worth exploring the actual source code of this gem. If you get a chance, go in this lib directory. Well, actually, probably in config here, and you'll see the routes that are denoted here. So then with that, we're able to go ahead and like lock down controllers, as you see in the docs here. Like you could just say require user allows you to access that method basically anywhere, since we've inherited it from this application layer class. Notice we inherit from application controller on all of our other controllers, so we get access to this stuff in each, which is useful. With that done, I need some sort of resource to like actually boot the app up to and add like a static route. So what I'll do is generate a controller that's going to just be our fictitious way of doing that. And I'll say Rails generate controller static. It's going to be the static controller, but we'll have an index action and a members only action for examples purposes. So I also don't want all this stuff that comes with the generator. So routes, skip assets, skip helpers. I could just create this by hand, but me being lazy. There we go. And we'll run that. We'll get just the views. I guess I need to, helper isn't correct. This isn't right, whatever that's for, but that's okay. But we get views and the test unit stuff, or unit tests. So all good, whatever. But that gives us a inclination to add now a root path. So I'll say root to static index. So we should probably create, we've got the index action here since the generator created it, but we don't have, or we do have the index. So that's that there. Great. And we can maybe just check out the app now, and there's probably a root path. So if we run bin dev, we can go over and check that out on localhost. And there's that file. Nothing fancy so far. Let's make that a little better, just to maybe look like an actual login form. So I'll get rid of this and do a little bit of Tailwind, since that's what we installed. Just a basic form looking container. We'll have a H1 with font black, text 3XL, and we'll say super mega passwordless app. And just some marketing copy here, really. Text large, text gray 600, margin Y 4, and sign up for members only access. Then we'll have some just basic buttons for now that are going to be the sign in button and create account button. So make those. Okay, and I'll use some Rails helpers for these, just link to sign in. And then we'll use, again, that user's sign in path. And I'll show you how I get to that in a second, just for some visuals, because I tried to explain it before, but I don't know if it's crystal clear. And we need one more for the sign up. So this is probably going to break. We don't actually have this route, but I'm going to just create it for now, create account. And we need like something like new user path. All right, so that's going to break because it's going to be like, we don't have that path to, to denote. So I'll comment that out for the second, just so you could see what's going on here. We want this to be rounded. So let's go and add that resource, and this should probably be justify center. So let's shift to the center. There we go. So we have sign in, which is great. It goes to what will be a form. This looks naked right now. There's actually a form element here. You just can't see it, like an input field. We'll get to that. If you want to verify those routes real quick, just if you go Rails info routes, you could also in your console run Rails routes. But if you go down to the bottom, you see this, the routes for passwordless engine. That's going to have those sign-in paths and token sign-in paths, sign-out paths. These two will be what we actually end up using. But you notice it's scoped to users based on what we passed. So the path here doesn't really give you that, but passwordless it's going to be that polymorphic association. So we're able to kind of hook into that in a reusable way. And then we've got a users path right now, and that's just the passwordless engine. Authenticatable users, that's where we've established that routing, and it gives us that ready to set up. But we still need our own like users mechanism to create a user and edit users, all of that stuff. So what I'll actually do is create a new user controller. I'll just do this one manually. Users controller RB class users controller inherits from application controller. And then we'll have a create a new action. So we'll be able to go to a new form. I'll just say user equals that, and then a create action just to actually create the user. Now, eventually you'll want to provide the opportunity for the user to edit their account. That isn't anything I'm really covering here, but that's basic Rails stuff you could do. So params, we'll pass a method of params there, and then we'll say if user save, we'll sign in, which is a method given to us from the gem user, and redirect to root path. I'll just say notice welcome aboard. Essentially either create an account right now, and we'll say else, I can't spell, redirect, render new, and this is just a shorthand for saying return to this instance in the controller instead of like redirecting or anything. And then we need that private method for this user params. So we'll come down there to the end, say private, define that. And that's going to give us just a quick way to require some parameters of the user, but also permit the username field and the email field we supplied previously. So that allows us to actually like save it to the database without fear. Okay, so back in our routes, we'll actually need to go back and then add a resources for users, just to have the whole grail there. That'll add these new paths for us. We are duplicating the user's path in this case, so like going to that will just be dependent on that namespace. So we need to be able to say users.users path if we want to go to the engine path, which I doubt we'll ever do, and then just like users path will be the one within our app. So that's how that's namespaced at the moment. Additionally, we need a user's view folders now that we have the controller there, so we could say users, and I'll add both just a form partial and a new HTML.erb file. In the new file, we'll render the partial just because we may reuse it later, but I'll actually copy the content of our static, this container, actually this too, just to reuse some stuff there, and we'll say create an account and render form, you can pass the instance of user through. You could do this, or if you just want to use the user instance variable, you could totally just use that in the form just to make your partial very basic, but it's not a big deal. Now in the form, we need to render the whole inputs and everything for the form. So this will be a little more involved, but here's that user instance we're coming through. We rendered through that partial. And I'm going to do a turbo false on this. Don't really need to do a turbo response. Do form. Okay, now we're able to add the username field and the email field. So let's do just the primitive stuff to start. So form.label username. And since tail1 resets everything, we have to add quite a bit of stuff here. Luckily, I can just copy and paste when we get it done for the first time. Ring sky 100, ring 4, border, ring transparent, focus, outline, none, rounded. If you're not familiar with like the ring class, it's basically just an outline thing. It's good for accessibility. It's kind of a nice touch. But essentially, I'm setting up a thicker ring that's only visible when you focus in on the field, as opposed to just always on. All right, so now we'll do the same and just swap out the username for email. And then also add our submit button. So form.submit, create account. I'll show you what this looks like in just a second. And we need an end tag for the form. There we go. So now we should be able to render this button on the front page. So let's go back and uncomment that. There we go. Now we get a create account link. Basic form to create a username and email. At this stage, it would technically work. So if we logged in, I could just say John Doe. So we create an account, and right now it just goes back to the index path, but there's no real way to know am I authenticated. So we can update that to do as such. Instead of this span here, we'll say if current user present. We can just check that instead of like is user signed in. That's coming from devise. Okay, so we got else and get that fixed up. So if current user present, we want to actually put this stuff on the else screen. So if they are present, we'll do you are signed in. I didn't add a validation for that one, but it probably would make sense to do if you require it. If you don't require it, we can just kind of have maybe a method to not display the username, but I'm going to make it very simple to start. Okay, so we'll be signed in now as John Doe. That's my username. That's my email. Very cool. And eventually we can extend that to like a sign out. So I'll do that in a second. Link to then we'll say users.signoutPath. Probably just copy this content, these classes. And then while I'm here, I might add one that says view members only content. We need to still, add the actions or content for this just as a demo purposes kind of thing. And I'll just make it look a little different, maybe underline. We need to still do the magic link thing to be actually signed in at this point. So we're not actually signed in. It just looked like it from that view. So let me get that portion going. We need to basically go to this route, and there should be a form here, but it's very hard to see. And it took me a second because the gem provides very basic markup, but it's nothing fancy. So let's go and add that and make it look better. And one way you can do it is to extend the gem, which is an engine, to kind of inherit some front end. So the way you would do that is kind of follow the naming conventions of the gem. So passwordless, and then inside that we'll have a sessions. And then inside sessions, we can have a new, and also, I think, what's the other one? Create. Yeah. To look at the markup for these, we can either look at the gem, which is probably the easiest bet. There's a link to them here, bundled views and sessions, crew, let's do new. Here's the bare bones version of it. I'll just paste that in for now. But we want to extend it to be a little better looking, of course, so not this. Now we're able to try it out. So John Doe at example.com. And we're going to get this. I ran into this before. So basically, in our development environment, we don't have a default URL host set. And for mailers to kind of kick off and send something, you need to set something in your configuration to do as such. So what I want to do is go into config environments and development for now. And we'll add a new configuration option. It's going to be called action mailer default URL options. And they say pass a host parameter, which we didn't do, but in our case, host is localhost. And since we're running the server on port 3000, we pass that port. And that can be an integer, so you don't have to do a string. Now in a production environment, you tend to use a email service provider, and they're going to provide like either a port number or something like that, or you just end up using your actual default URL to your app. So maybe it's like like for me, webcrunch.com. It's the full URL instead of just localhost. So you'd have like the full URL declared there, just so your mailer knows where to kick things off, where to serve it from, essentially. So with that done, we probably need to restart the server just to be safe. So I went ahead and did that. And in this case, we'll try it one more time. Send the magic link. It did. So here is what an email looks like being sent in the console. I could boot this up locally, maybe use something like Mailhog or something like that. There's another one that's it's beyond what I'm remembering right now, but it basically opens up each time you send an email. But all we want really is just this link, and eventually you'd probably want to customize this email to look cooler, but for now this is going to log me in. So now I'm logged in. If I go to index, which I'm at right now, I can actually visit this. I can visit this path. This doesn't actually exist yet. So we'll fix that link real quick on static controller. Before action, we'll say before action require user and just say only members only. That lets us basically work in this case. So again, we need to sign in. I'm not sure why that kicked me off. That's interesting. There we go. Couldn't find post session thoughts poll. Interesting. Okay, let me create bit. So let's add that actually first. And all I want to do is copy this over, and we'll get from the gem the create string that comes through. There we go. That's all I wanted to get, and we'll save that down. Let's try this once more. There we go. We're inside. Now, if I go to this, I should be able to see, some stuff. So let's go and just add the members only content for now. It's gonna just be, primitive jargon, but let's make something there. Okay. If we go to that link, for some reason it's locking me out. I think I have something up with the index. I'm clicking sign out path. I didn't actually put the members only path. So that's going to end up being, I don't have that path. So let's do that. Routes. Then we need to add a get, and it's going to be, let's see, static members only, and I'll just say as members only. It allows us to have a smaller path name. So it should just be members only path, right on. Okay, and then we can add that to this in that case. Go back, let's see if we can sign in again. For some reason, it's not sending or going to the create action. That's interesting. All right, I know why this is not redirecting where I want it to go, because the turbo thing strikes again. This has been my rude awakening with turbo. We need to say turbo false on all forms, because they're on by default, and it's been throwing me off this whole time trying to get this to work. So this normally needs to redirect to a new page, which now it does. So I get this message that's actually part of the create template that we added. So if you look into this create, that's what that's rendering at this point. So it's not giving away that there is an email in the system, but it is saying that if you got it, you got an email just now, which is true. And then we go and add this link, and I switch browsers just trying to figure out what was wrong there, but this should sign you in at this point. And now that we have the correct link here, we can go and view this members only content. Pretty simple, pretty basic, nothing fancy there, but that is a way you could do that. And additionally, like add subscription logic or something around it if you wanted to, but that's just how that would work. So now anytime you sign out, you'd have to sign in again and get an email based on your account. Here it goes again. And that's just the other traditional way of doing more secure logins without having to remember a password, which is honestly the biggest problem with username and password to date. So that's the quick walkthrough of this gem. There's more you could do. I would offer to take a look at the documentations, allow you to kind of change, what you want to do as the path, naming conventions, if you want to do anything after saved, all that kind of stuff. And you can generate your own magic links, which is pretty cool. It kind of hooks into that logic, allows you to do stuff and override other things too. So I hope that was useful. This might be something I explore in the future that just kind of removes that giant hurdle of devise. To be honest, there's a lot less logic under the hood with this, and it's still pretty handy and done for you. So there's no like password reset to worry about. There's no confirmation step, all those kind of things. While you could add them, they would be maybe a little more secure, but in this case, if you have access to your email, chances are you do, you'll be in good shape. One other way to extend this maybe is to do like a SMS or a two-factor authentication extension. I think that's where devise might be handy. It kind of handles some of that stuff for you, but for that, we'll do it another day. All right, I think that's all for now. Look forward to hearing your feedback on this if you have any. Also, let me know what you want to cover next. I'm open to complete Let's builds or different topics than Rails. I don't know. I think most people come here for that stuff, and that's fine. But I'm kind of at a point where I've built a lot of things, and there's not really a strive of for me to go build a complete like crazy clone of something. But it would be neat as an exercise, of course. So if that is something you want to see, let me know. All right, peace.